before we're starting, Cory, I just want to ask you where people can get your work, where who you are a little bit, like quickly go on who you are and what is your path and where you're going through and all your projects, so we can like start to talk about these things.
My path. Oh, geez. I guess I don't know my own path, my friend. I mean, I try to know, right? But I think all of us are trying to find our way in this life. I think the goal is to try to find our way, and we all are going toward different paths. Sometimes we deceive ourselves, realizing, oh, wait, this is not the right path. We have to go toward another path. But what we have found in this community that you speak about is a very beautiful community, honestly, because it's full of a lot of people who are doing a lot of self-healing. You can call it a health community. I feel like maybe some people want to call it a spiritual community or a truth or freedom, but it's also a health community because a bunch of people are gaining a lot of personal benefits from the knowledge. It's not just knowledge that is freeing their mind, it's healing their body because they're freeing their mind. And that is the power of this knowledge. It can literally change somebody's entire worldview. And therefore, they'll start looking at their food. They'll start looking at every little aspect within their life because they hit their roots, their mind. So everything that I do is a matter of education. And that's why a lot of the works I do are focused around education. There's a lot of reasons why that is, not just because political voting and elections are useless and actually are ineffectual and counterintuitive, but it's also because education is what you can see direct results of, and it can be a one-on-one person. There's no faith involved in the process. You can say, oh my gosh, I really hope this person listens to me, but if you shouldn't really teach somebody who's just going to outright deny you as a teacher. I mean, a teacher and a student have to work together as a relationship. Somebody has to be open and willing to learn, and the teacher has to be open and willing to learn from the student as well, but introducing concepts to them, asking them questions to get them thinking. And there has to be this sort of holistic connection. So we have this relationship with the universe if we're open to understanding more about ourselves as well. We have to question, hey, what is nature? What is this natural environment? And I know we're going to talk about that a bit today. And that helps us know a lot more about ourselves as well. Because if you're looking at nature as a teacher and the teacher is supposed to ask questions, well, nature is just there. It's not, we have to ask questions. It's making us ask questions. It's not even talking to us, but it's making us ask questions. So wow, what a wonderful teacher it is, because it's actually making us ask questions for ourselves, which is the same thing Socrates did, the oldest philosopher, saying, let's just ask people questions. And the same thing Larkin Rose does in this Candles in the Dark seminar, where he just asks people questions, and yet it's teaching people. So isn't that interesting? And I know we talked about this before. It's like, sort of, what approach could we use with people who are closed and don't want this information?
Hmm.
So I hope for anybody who are out there that you are a student, and I consider myself a student. I think we're all a student. We're always learning, and you're open and willing to learn from this knowledge that we're here sharing today. And across many of these different content creators, you don't have to agree with everybody 100%. No one ever said you had to agree with everybody. No one ever said you had to attach yourself to an ideology or a diet or one way of thinking.
Hmm.
You never had to. In fact, maybe that's the very problem. Maybe you have to find yourself, and having others guide you can help you find yourself, believe it or not. Maybe you don't have to put all your dependence on them for who you are, but you can find yourself and use their guidance rather than their dependence. And so we're going to be talking about a lot of this, I'm sure, but my projects, the End of Slavery Summit, had over 50 speakers, including Fred. And Fred, you talked about shadow work,
Hmm.
and we talked about a lot of different things related to that, which is very important. Carl Jung, I'm sure, coined the
Yes.
term. If anybody is familiar with his works, psychiatrist, psychologist, always looking at people's minds, because he found so much value and power in it. And if anybody has ever read his works, it's very detailed. It tells you why people do what they do. And he is somebody who even admitted that, there's this belief in the state or in government, and it's sort
Yes.
of like a religion. People sort of treat it like a god. He even said this as a, leading psychologist himself. And I have that as a quote in my Slavery Gone for Good book as well. So I've written a few books on different topics, one on slavery, abolitionism, another on nature, the wisdom of nature, Sapientia Naturae. Another on anarchy. What is this concept we call anarchy? Should we fear it? Should we think it's chaos? Should we think it's, oh my gosh, we should stay away from it? Or should we realize maybe it actually has a definition? Or maybe the people who call themselves anarchists in history, like Emma Goldman or Lysander Spooner or Aidan
Hmm.
Ballou, are maybe not so extreme and crazy. I mean, gosh, Aidan Ballou was setting up his own towns in the Underground Railroad trying to help free slaves. Does that sound like a dangerous guy to you? Maybe dangerous to the establishment, dangerous to slavery, but definitely helpful for freedom, helpful for
Hmm.
moral evolution. He was going out there teaching people, saying, hey, he wrote a whole document titled Moral Power versus Political Power, showing how moral power always wins, essentially. Check it out. Just look it up. Aidan Ballou, moral power versus political power. I mean, it's just most people in politics today don't even understand this, but this is an abolitionist. And this is why I focus on a lot of their works. And I've had a lot of interviews talking about abolitionism. If people are interested, we talked
Hmm.
about that before. I know it's not the topic for today, but figured to just throw it out there because a lot of people tend to ask me, they want to do interviews about slavery and abolitionism, like these heavy topics. And it's like, yeah, they're very important topics. But we also need to come down and realize that while we're abolishing something evil, getting rid of something that doesn't belong, there's also something to add in
Yes.
order to crowd out that evil. And that is nature, morality, truth, things that empower people, who give them power. Yeah, we're taking away the power that doesn't belong. At the same time, in order to do that, you have to bring in the power that does belong. And that power, as knowledge, belongs to everybody. So the End of Slavery Summit, go to endofslavery.org for that, and the liberator.us, which is the Liberator 2. Super educative, super
Hmm.
collaborative. Anybody can get involved. So be sure to check that out. You can send an article, poetry, music. I mean, gosh, we have a 24-hour music radio. I have that basically set up completely. So it's just like, looking at a week or so from when we're recording this, when I'm going to get this started, I have to put up a green screen, and that's pretty much it. Because I have everything else ready. We have the templates ready. If anybody has a server, a Discord server, Telegram server, I don't know, Facebook group or whatever, you can link it to me, send it to me. And Fred, I can probably link your Libercast page as well.
Sure.
On the network section, there's a network section on that page. You'll see if you scroll down, there's a button that says network. And you can just send in your different server and it'll be listed on the website so anybody can access it. Rather than you sending your videos or sending your individual links, you can share your whole server and then everybody can meet each other and network and whatever. I figured that would be the
That's a good.
best way.
That's a freaking good idea, man.
It's probably the best way, in my view, to have people network with each other. And of course, as long as everything abides to the article guidelines, which is very simple, that people care about freedom, ownership, self-responsibility, self-ownership, it's very simple. And if people agree to that, great, get involved and start writing articles.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's very. It's I like the way you're phrasing things and how you say things, and I think we need this network of people. We need people to get together on the same page. This is why we're doing what we're doing. It's to
Mhm.
bring people together,
We
and
just started.
it's never. And yes, absolutely, we're just beginning. We're just trying to create it. Maybe no, I'm not doing as much as Corys can do, but I mean, this is where we're starting. We have to verbalize it. We have to learn. We have to learn how to learn. How to think. All these things, and
Hey, Fred,
yeah,
what do you like think about just in the past year, how many new content creators has joined the One Great Work Network or got involved with sharing the ideas of natural law?
I cannot say.
I mean, a good amount though. Like, even though like we can say, oh, look at all of humanity who doesn't know, it's like you have a lot of content creators who are trying, who are at least putting out something. And you
Yeah,
realize that also defeats censorship because if things go down, at least there's more channels putting it out.
absolutely.
So okay, you're getting 30 views, 20 views because you just started out. I did too, and when I was just starting out. Doesn't mean that you're not going to grow inevitably over time, or that people later down the road, when they do
Yes,
research on it, aren't going to find you. So like people have to consider that like it's actually growing massively each and every single year. But yeah, we still have just started basically. And
yes.
having collaboration is the most impactful thing to do, hands down. So if Fred, if we just all had our like one channel, all of us, the whole network, just like made one channel and put all our work and effort into one channel, how big would it be?
Huge.
Yes, but instead we have like all these small little channels. Some of them, it's like they're not connecting to each other. No one really knows if they know each other. It's like you have to be able to like click on this link and that link and this link and that. It's like confusing. But if you have one place where everything is and you see everybody's works and you see it's always making new additions every single week and you look forward to it. I mean, how often, how more likely is it for people to see that information, especially like under one banner, whether it's a movement or the Liberator 2, like seeing that many times and many more places, then it makes it much bigger as a overall. It's like everybody knows what CNN is or Fox News is. Everybody knows who Trump is. Everybody knows who these people are. And if you wonder why, it's because Trump puts his name in full capital letters on everything. It's like it's huge. It's in bold. You can see it. Everybody sees it. They use the same colors. They use the same slogans, and they're just pumping it out left and right. And then there's a billion journalists who are pumping out the same information, reposting the same article over and over and over again. It's like no wonder why people are believing certain things or falling to certain ideologies, because it's basically handed to them.
Yeah, same old propaganda, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
We have to use it for our advantage, for
Deprogramming.
Yeah, deprogram, absolutely.
Well,
I
because
like
people
it.
were programmed in the first place
Yes.
by rote learning, alliteration in school. It's just do what you're told. What's said in the textbook or what's said over and over again, you must keep doing. And it's not so much like critical thinking or thinking for yourself, but when it comes to deprogramming, it's like, okay, so they expose people to so much symbolism to program them. So how do we get people out of that programming? Well, we can share symbolism that goes against their symbolism, because symbolism is very powerful. That's why people have like their own flags and stuff like that. And that can be very helpful, but we still have to realize like an attachment to that thing could still be dangerous. So I think that's where like it's kind of a good connection bridge to this philosophy I'm mentioning, because there's going to be complications even on the way to truth. There's even going to be complications even past our goals.
How can we go through these echo chambers? How can we break them, at your opinion?
Break the echo chambers, as in, just for people to clarify, what you mean by echo chambers, tell me if I'm wrong, is people sharing the same information in the same community.
Yeah, it creates a bubble with a thick, like shell, and not much people are getting into it because of that. Because there's a lot of phenomenon on the psychological aspect, like gaslighting. Not gaslighting, but I'm searching my words.
It's
Not gaslighting,
comfortable.
but gatekeeping and things like that can happen, in different groups. So I think what you're trying to do is to at least make it bigger than little spot here and there of people
Right.
who are like
Exactly.
who think alike. We have to go outside of this bubble. This is what I'm saying, actually.
Has a lot to do with comfort and people getting out of their comfort zones, getting out of their attachments, which is very, very important if you want to have any sense of freedom. And this is where you can sort of go into the Eastern philosophy side of things, which a lot of my philosophy, I know that we're talking about today, and sort of bridging into it, kind of ties in, is because if you want to be free in both your mind, body, and soul, it's like you have to realize that material things can even hold you back. It's not just these governments or these laws or these systems that be, but your own possessions in your own life. And that can affect you in the way you deliver the message and the way that message is carried out into the world and such. So it's important to always have these underlying situations or surrounding situations configured as well. Because you can get like some really core pieces to the puzzle, but the puzzle still isn't complete without the other pieces that surround and make up that puzzle. So, it's like anything that you build. You can build a huge sculpture, but if you don't gloss it or if you don't put the finishing touch on it, it may not appeal to people. I mean, that little bit of touch can make a big difference. And the same thing in diet, a little bit of change in diet can make a huge difference in an individual's life. They may not realize that until they actually do it.
Oh my God. I could talk about this I think there's the principle of correspondence that we're still I'm because I'm a this is what I do. I talk about natural law, and the thing is, it's when you can actually see the patterns in yourself and in the relation you have with people. And I think the food thing is a big thing. It's we're literally what we're eating. And
Hmm.
it's I mean, whatever the diet you have, I don't mind. But I mean, it's very life changing, and it helps or your body for doing the transition. And for me, it has been a catalyst for a spiritual awakening. It was a little before I had this epiphany of the realization of the self
Hmm.
and spirituality and things like that. So
Yes.
I put up. You have two books. One
Hmm.
about abolitionism and anarchy, and man, this book is awesome. I like it very much. I'm a advocate of anarchy and abolitionism myself. Can you give us a little hypnosis about this your work?
Well, this book is definitely one of my favorites too because of how small and simple it is. I think it's really easy and it sums up the concepts very quickly. So I don't think people have an excuse to be like, "Oh, it's too long. I can't read it." It's like it's only 4 chapters. It goes through. It's very straightforward. What is natural? What is government? What is anarchy? Like literally, as it says on the slide. And then, how do we create that? How do we manifest it? What are we creating? And really, this book gets into all of creation, what we're creating in all of creation. Because we're talking about some really big topics here. We're talking about government, we're talking about nature. I mean, these are huge things that affect so many people, in some ways more than they think. And then there's, of course, the superstitions. People don't realize there's belief systems that uphold government. They don't realize that they had a false misconception of anarchy. They don't realize that anarchy is something other than what they were told it is. And so, they watch movies and they see the anarchy symbol. They go on TV and they see all these people with bandanas burning down buildings with anarchy symbols. Of course, it's quick to assume what anarchy is, but there's a whole different perspective to it. And if it didn't have such a history of people who call themselves anarchists, who were actually trying to free other people in their mindsets and trying to create great things, I
Hmm.
wouldn't really use that term. I mean, there's been many times that I've said on my channel, like, we don't need to use this term. We could just say nature. We could just say voluntarism. We could just say reality, to be frankly honest with you. And yet, so many people are quick to say, "Oh, it's fantasy. It's the practicality." So it's important to understand then what is nature, because if people are quick to say, "Oh, it's fantasy," or if it's not possible, and that's one of the main concerns people have, even people who understand it, they say, "Oh, well, we'll never get people enough to that level, or we'll never get to that world." If they don't understand nature, I think they're missing a huge part of the puzzle, because nature is reality, is truth, is this health of the
Hmm.
world that was there before government ever was. So if you don't understand that and you are born into a system of government, of course that will seem like your natural reality. And if they start saying things like government is necessary, it's necessary for order, it has a constitution you must follow, they start to sound a lot like nature itself, by saying that basically you have to follow them and you have no choice. Well, aren't there laws in nature that I have no choice but to follow and I have no choice but to learn about? So how come I have to this second God, this second nature that I have to follow that calls itself government? But is it really nature? Is it really God? It's just a bunch of human beings. What gives them that power to do these things to my life? To say I have to be born a certain way, to say I have to sign my signature a certain way, to say I have to pay taxes a certain amount depending on whatever they want to impose upon me. It's all arbitrary. It's all based on opinion, and it's not based on any sense of reality or nature. So, who is really the one living in a fantasy? If something is based purely on opinion, purely on belief, and something else is based on what has always been here, what will never change, then one is reality and the other one is fantasy.
I
And
get
so
that. Yes.
Opinions can be based in truth. Opinions can be based in reality, but then it's just reality.
I mean, there's I brought it up like just you just what you said earlier in the French side. I was like, do you find like tyranny in nature? Do you find money in nature? Do you find religion in nature?
Right. You
They're
don't even
all
find time
men made beliefs and
in
cults
time.
and creeds. And
Time as well, which is this is also important because I talk about in my philosophy how you can use the distinction of time to tell you all truth, because time ultimately, like over time, we learn what to do and what not to do, is to say, oh wait, slavery's not working, or this is not good for the economy, or maybe I shouldn't keep doing this thing, maybe I shouldn't be getting drunk every day, maybe I shouldn't be addicted to drugs. You find that out in time. You don't always find that out right away. And some people, it takes a lot of turbulence. Sometimes there's blockades in the way, but it's all a learning process that takes time. So I talk about time being this core concept, but even in nature, there is no such concept as time because nature simply is present and already is here. So time is really just our construct and our projection as to the energy and the movement as to things of what is happening. Like we made time based on the sun and the moon and its movement, right? But it
Mhm.
kind of perverts the idea of the sun and the moon, because instead of saying, well, I'll meet you when the sun is up or whatever, we've sort of said, okay, well, it's got to be this specific time and this day and age and this and this and that, and then it becomes really complicated. Now, does that get us to think? Does it make us more intelligent? I'm not going to complain about simple things like time. I'm going to complain about complex things that are trying to literally be nature in every single way and telling you that you have to conform to it. Because honestly, I can say I don't need to live by time if I don't want to. I can live without time. I have that choice. I can meditate and be like, I'm just going to be present and aware. I don't need to worry about time. But in the case of government, you don't have the choice of anything, because government by definition destroys choice. Otherwise, it isn't
Absolutely,
government. That's
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, I mean, this little book there, I'm gonna bring it up. This is the French version, but essentially, this is the 101 of tyranny. This book is showing you and telling you how it works and the lies and and one thing that I want to that people will listen to this, it's to pay attention to the words that are used because they are very important. And I mean, just as the word anarchy brings up a bad a bad vibe just by itself, it needs to be I, I mean not brainwashed to, it's like brainwashing people to think again, like to be deprogrammed, because
Right.
there's
And
a
it's
lot of
it's
repeating.
you
There's
don't
a
know how to
lot
say
of,
it. Yeah.
yes.
Well, you
And
know why you don't know how to say it? Because it's such a natural thing you expect people to do is think. So it's
yes.
like, how could you ask someone to think? Or how do you ask someone to live? It's like they should already be living. They should already be thinking. So it's like, why do we have to ask for that? Why do we have to talk about that? It's like people talking about gender nowadays or whatever. It's like, why are we talking about this? You almost have to question. It's like, is every part of society being compromised that we have to talk about some of the most fundamental things that were never questioned until now because all of a sudden we thought we can alter or change nature when it's been here all this time?
I mean, we have a question by Rick. Do you think humanity can get back to nature without suffering? I think of this time as growing pains, and if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Can you answer this question?
Yes, Crypt Rick, if you're in the chat, hello, good friend. So I'd be curious what you mean by suffering, because I think the whole idea of suffering is, I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe you're saying, well, there has to be a lot of pain that people have to go through to face their own shadows. There definitely is a lot of internal conflict that we have to address. We call this shadow work.
Yes.
But when you say suffering, I think this is an important concept because you look at all sorts of Eastern philosophies, suffering is usually attached to desire and attachment. So what is making you suffer is my question, Cryptrick, because if humanity has to go back to nature and that requires suffering, then that means there's something in the way preventing them from getting back to nature. What is that something? I mean, it's got to be something that isn't nature, because if we're saying we want to get back to nature and there's something blocking us from getting into nature, then it's something not from nature or something that is interfering with our natural ability. So the question is, what is causing suffering? And I can't say it's going to be the same thing for everybody, because
Mm.
people suffer in different ways. So that's why I ask you, Cryptrick, I'm like, what do you mean by suffering? Because, if you want to get more specific, and you could say it's a certain thing, it's a certain product. Can people live without this certain thing, without this certain product? Do
I
they
mean,
ever question that?
I can. I mean, it can be a violence done against you, psychological violence, or
Hmm.
abuse, or lies and programming,
But it doesn't
things like
have to
that.
be. It doesn't have to be suffering. It could be empowering, right? See, like I
Mm.
did go through a period of time where I questioned my own beliefs, and it took some crying. It took me actually, you can call that shadow work. It took me some, like, ooh, that was some turbulence. I had to get past these blockades in my mind I
Yeah.
couldn't get past. Some turbulence. But am I going to, like, call that suffering? Or am I going to call that part of the process of trying to question my own worldview? Because if I keep myself on track, I'm not going to call that suffering. I'm going to say, man, I learned from this. This is an experience. It's like there's a lot of things that happen to people all the time. There's chances we take every day. You can look at that as suffering, or you can look at that as part of your trajectory on your journey. It's all just a journey that we're partaking in. So who's to say it has to be a form of suffering? Unless, of course, you have an attachment to something that you don't want to let go of.
Yeah. He meant shadow work. Yeah, the suffering. Do you think we can go back to nature without shadow working? And he's and I doubt that we can grow up without shadow working.
Right. It happens.
In the masses, in the aggregate, I think it's impossible without shadow working.
Yeah.
But the amount of work is it's crazy.
Yeah.
It even for us individually, it's mind blowing. You know, can be gut wrenching at the same time. It's like, yes, you have a lot of beautiful things that comes from shadow work, but it's still is suffering. That's, I mean, at my humble opinion, I think humans are learn better when they're suffering and pain. This is how we're indoctrinated. you know we don't.
Well, I would argue that they're suffering because they don't want to learn and they're facing that
Absolutely.
resistance. But when they
Ignorance.
accept it, when they learn to how to accept it, then it becomes easier.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
that it's easy, but it becomes easier.
When people are ignorant, they're suffering even more. More, the
Mhm.
more you're ignorant, the more you suffer because of that. I think in the context of culture and religions and things like that, I think it's
Yes.
just holding us back from going forth as a species, as a civilization, and as uh, 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 philosophically, intellectually, and emotionally, we're stuck. Stagnation. There's
Mhm.
because of this culture. you know
Yes. Yes. And stagnation to inversion, you can say it's like
yes,
sort of going the other
absolutely.
way.
Yeah.
Because if you're not going toward truth, it's like, where are you going? Well, you actually don't know, because truth is the only thing that is, and therefore anything else is just an illusion. So you're basically in perpetual confusion. So you really aren't going toward evil, you're just going toward who knows where. And that's literally why it's evil, because if you don't know it, you can't love it. You can't accept it. There's literally no way you can live with it. You can try to live with evil, but you cannot live with it. You cannot live with ignorance. You can try to live with ignorance, but you're only going to last so long unless it comes to your demise or other people's demise.
Yeah.
One way or another, ignorance is the root cause to all evil. Knowledge is the root cause to all good. This is
Right.
what I say in Naturosophy. It's the quote by Socrates, but it's also core to what I
Yep.
consider all morality whatsoever. You know, whether you're looking at actions or anything more, which again, why I create Naturosophy, to extend past natural law, to realize that we need to look at food. Food and health is just as important. How many people do I come across who say, yeah, you know, it's wrong to harm another person, but I could harm myself? It's like, nah, okay, you realize vices go into the bounds of crimes. Not that we should say vices are crimes, but to realize that vices could turn into crimes if you're not careful, if you don't have temperance, if you don't have responsibility. So it's all the matter of shadow work, absolutely. And you were right. The way you worded it was perfectly. We do it naturally over time as we grow older if we allow ourselves to.
Yep.
However, we get distracted into the man-made things we don't want to. We pull into attachments of material things. It keeps us in that game, the politics game, the religion game, as you mentioned, and we don't want to accept nature as is, and we don't align to the wu-wei. The wu-wei is a Taoist term for letting things natural be natural, essentially. Letting things be. You can say it's live and let live, right? So although we might want to talk about the golden rule, doing to others what you want done to you, the law of attraction, all this, that's very important. But there's also another missing part that a lot of people in the natural law crowd may not understand, or I would like to see be connected. And that is the concept of the Wu Wei and the Zeren. And this is because the yin yang sort of Taoist ideology, if you want to call it an ideology, is really empowering for the individual. It doesn't ask for any money. It doesn't say worship this thing or look up to this thing, go to this building, you know, read this book. It doesn't even like the Tao Te Ching. It's like, it wasn't even meant to be a public document necessarily. I mean, a lot of the Stoic texts too, like those were not meant to be public necessarily. A lot of that got spread to the public, and the public was like, wow, this is really powerful. And so a lot of this is very internal wisdom in having to empower ourselves. Wu Wei means we sort of let go and sort of let things be. You can call it inaction. Might fear a lot of people because they think, oh my gosh, we got to take action. We got to end evil. We got to, you know, get rid of these people in power. We got to vote new people in. We got to do this. We got to do that. Maybe it's the opposite, because how we got to the situation of evil in the first place was humans trying to change everything in their reality, using force to make other people comply to what they think the world should be, using their own human will, projecting it upon everybody, projecting their traumas. You know, you mentioned shadow work,
Yes.
very important. You look at a lot of police people, a lot of people in that policing industry. Do they have good relationships with their wives, with their husbands? They don't. A lot of their suffering that they had at a young age, a lot of them are also, you can say, smaller. I don't want to generalize, but you can see demographics generally being among this. A lot of them are looking for power, and this is how they find their power, is by putting on the suit and tie and having more rights, or thinking that they have more rights than other human beings. So they basically project their traumas that they had at a young age onto others. And this is why you see corrupt police people out there. It's not to say there are police people who aren't corrupt. There certainly are some police who think they're doing the right thing and don't realize they're upholding a state that is inherently corrupt, or laws that can never truly be freedom, or laws that can truly help humanity. But it's to say that a lot of people who are evil are going to latch to positions of power because it allows them to perpetuate their evil, and it allows them to escape their traumas without doing the shadow work. And so that is what you see happen in society. A lot of people who want to become the politicians or be the cops, the sociopaths, or the psychopaths. I have my friend Mike, producer Mike, Mark Passio's old producer. He also, says like there's like 1 in 60 people or whatever is a psychopath. He's like, you may not even know it. He's like always sharing statistics about that. I'm like, that's pretty scary, because that means there could be psychopaths walking among you and don't even realize it. And that's because they're psychopaths. They can be pretty smart. It doesn't mean that they're dangerous. It doesn't mean that they aren't. It doesn't mean that they're moral people. So you can still have knowledge, but still do bad things if you're not careful or allowing that knowledge to share to other people. If you're keeping that knowledge to yourself, well, then you're basically perpetuating evil because you're allowing other people to be ignorant. The goal of knowledge is to share knowledge, to
Yeah.
help the world. That's what knowledge is there for. If you keep knowledge for yourself, you're basically also allowing ignorance. So you can call yourself knowledgeable all you want, but you're not helping share knowledge. You're actually helping to share ignorance. And this is actually a funny dynamic, because then that means a lot of authors or health gurus or people out there with an agenda are essentially promoting ignorance and don't realize that they are. Or they are, and they really, and then they're okay with it because it makes them money and it makes them have a living. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of shadow work to do, and people don't look this far into things as to say, wait, there could be health gurus who are projecting their problems on me, trying to make themselves feel better by making me feel better. There's policemen out there who are projecting their traumas on me by making me feel bad so they can feel better about themselves. It's all psychology, right? You can get really deep into it. But I think that's interesting. But if you were to let things go and let things be and say, I'm not going to take this position of authority, I'm not going to promote these people to be authority, you're going to basically accept nature as your government. You're going to accept nature or God as your government. You're going to let reality and truth manifest on its own,
Hmm.
because it is. And anything that's contrary to what is essentially humans trying to be what is, trying to say we are the ones who can be the gods who rule over everybody. So Zoran is the concept of the natural. Wu-wei is the concept of the effortless. So these two work together in Taoism, and basically it's the idea that in order for the natural to manifest, you have to just be effortless in your action. Let things be. That means sometimes learning not to speak so loudly, not speak at all, and let things be, because people will face their own karma in time.
Hmm.
And you can be with the people who respect you. You can be with the people who care about you. You don't have to waste all your time with the people who aren't going to give you your care and time and energy that you're giving to them. It's like a wasted investment. We talk about time and attention being spiritual currency. Well,
Hmm.
you can waste your time and attention, your spiritual currency, on people who are not spiritual, people who are like, I'm going to take that and just throw it in the garbage can. Like, we don't want to hang out with those people because they're not taking that currency and doing something good with it. It's like, would you go into a trade with somebody and be like, okay, I'm going to give you this thing, and they're just be like, oh, in the garbage can? It's like, bro, I just gave you something. Why would you do that? Like, what's the point of me talking to you, of interacting with trading? Like, if you're just going to throw it in the garbage can, right? So
Yeah.
you hope, like, okay, if I give something to you, you're going to do something with it, do something valuable with it. So that way we both do something valuable. It's a good trade. So
But
just
I,
something to
I,
consider.
I'm encouraged by what you told, and you made me realize how it was getting bigger. We were talking about the one great work, and but there's a counter response from the spiritual movements, and it's getting bad there. You have a dialectic that is creating itself in inside and between the true spiritual freedom and the fake spiritualist that are there. And I mean, I've been ranting about this shit in French a lot these last weeks, because I think it was something that we needed to expose. And being realistic, being stoic about this knowledge, this objectivity, and being very careful about not getting into these traps, these
Mhm.
cul-de-sac, like Mark Basio says. And I think it's very relevant for this thing there. And I'm very interested on what would be the basis of Naturosophy.
The basis of Naturosophy, which you can call Naturosophy, you can call different ways, however you want to pronounce it. I mean, listen, it's just a word, right? Represents something bigger. And I
Yeah.
realize this is not the only philosophy. I'm not claiming to know the answers. I'm not claiming to know the only way that everybody should follow. And this is some disclaimers before we talk about it. But here's a chart you see on the screen. And basically, it's a summary of Naturosophy, this philosophy that I created to sort of bring back older philosophy and the value and meaning and purpose in the universe, but also to emphasize nature, quite obviously, by the name, Naturosophy. If you break it down, nature and then Sophie, right? So the wisdom of nature, the knowledge of nature, which is also the title of my other book, Sapientia Naturae. So it's just another way to say it, essentially. And if you look at the left side versus the right side, and this is not in politics, this is just for the diagram, you'll see that the left side is talking about nature, and on the right side, we're talking about denature, or anything that is opposite or contrary to it. Bear in mind, as I said before, anything that is truth simply is. And I'm equating truth completely, completely equally to nature, to reality, to health. All these terms are one and the same. Now, if somebody disagrees with that, I'd be interested to hear their case. But if you open up any dictionary, I will guarantee you, you're going to run into the same words over and over and over again. If you go down a loop and you look at honesty as well, honesty, another word for correct, another word for truth, another word for moral, another word for sensible. I mean, you're going to run into some words that are all basically related to one and the same reason why Aristotle came up with his whole list of virtues. And it's basically like a list of like, this is a good thing. This is also a good thing. Well, this is also a good thing. Well, this is also a good thing. It's like, and then he just has like a list of 500 virtues by the end of saying this is a good thing, because he realizes there's so many connections you can make. It's like, yeah, you should be trustworthy, but you should also be honest, and you should also be respectful, and you should also be moral, and you should also be, it's like, but they're all basically the same thing, which is that you intend to do good. You intend to live in harmony with the universe or with other people to create order in the universe. That's the whole reason why we have philosophy or virtue or natural law to begin with, is because we say, hey, this can help us with our living. This can help create order. So upon looking at this chart, and there's an arrow pointing down, nature, if we learn from nature, we have knowledge, right? And from that knowledge, we can make an appeal to nature. Now, in philosophy, they're going to call that a fallacy. They're going to say appeal to nature is a fallacy. You cannot say what is natural is what is good.
Oh, really?
Right. And I say, well, you can't ever do that, really. And some people will say, oh, yeah, well, there's cases, scenarios where, yeah, it probably is the case. But then why is it the case? If you acknowledge there is a case, then what makes it so? It's knowledge. So knowledge is the prerequisite to making an appeal to nature, in a sense of recognizing what is natural to do and what is not natural to do, how we should act and how we should not act. So this goes for everything we do in our life. If we realize a food makes us sick, we say, oh, shoot, I shouldn't be eating this food. You can say the food is natural, but it's not natural for you to consume. So although the food is natural to exist, perhaps, it's not natural for you and your human nature to interact with the nature of that food. So all the interactions between one nature or another is the matter of knowledge. And this is where the nature dynamic comes in, basically understanding that, everything has a nature of its own. So I can break down any one nature, whether it's an apple or a glass, and I can say, why is this glass? What is the purpose of this glass? What's the function of this glass? Now, what was it made out of, right? What is required to make this glass? Now, what side effects are there of this glass, essentially? What other purposes could it be used for? I could whack someone on the head. There's all sorts of things, right? So this is all coming to understand the nature of any one thing, is realizing what could be done with it. What is it made of? Every little thing about one thing. And that's knowledge. Knowledge is trying to dissect the universe into saying, what more could we know about this world? Okay, so now following this chart, if you go down again, you have time and place. Now, time and place is important because let's say I said, hey, you shouldn't be eating this certain food because you realize it's making you sick. Well, now you know that you should not be consuming this food. Whether it's at a certain time or a certain place, or you shouldn't be going to a certain place or going to a certain food. And you have to find your place through time, essentially. So you got sick. Oh, shoot, that's not where I should be. I should not be sick. So my right condition would be not to be sick. So that's my place. My place in this world is not to be sick. And I learned that by time, because after I ate the food, I felt worse. And then as the day got on, I got worse. But then after I got worse and I learned from it, I realized with more time that I am now healed and now I'm better, and I realize I don't have to do that again. So you basically find your time and place over time, and over going different places and having different experiences and seeing different things. So you can say time and place is multifunctional in this way. And then alignment. So when you realize, okay, this is what I should do, or this is where I should be, this is what foods I should consume, that's how we understand our accordance. Like, are we in accord to our body? Are we listening to our body? Like, yeah, I'm consuming something I know is really going to help me. So like right now I'm drinking cacao water. I didn't even know this existed till like a week ago. Um, Basically, they just juice the part of the cacao bean which gets wasted by 80% of the cocoa industry. And it's pretty interesting because it's a new product on the market, because obviously people like chocolate and they want to consume different juices that are like natural. So I was like, okay, I'll check it out. Cacao water, right? So this is a new product on the market with innovation because people had a demand, and so there's a supply, or they're like, maybe this is a new idea. It's never been done before. So I say, okay, how is my body going to react to this? I'm not just going to consume something that I know is going to make me sick. I'm going to consume something because I know I'm going to get something out of it, whether it's happiness or nutrition, or what my purpose is of using this thing, as I talked about before. So that's very important. That is our alignment to understanding what products we should consume, and for our own health, what we're trying to achieve, right? And so that's where we have the answer. It's like, if I want an answer to like what's going to make my health better, well, it's going to be acting in alignment, finding my time and place, making a rightful appeal with knowledge of nature. So you just, if you just track it back, this graph up and down the graph, it'll keep making sense, right? So the answer is essentially your embrace. You're saying, this is what I should consume, so I'm embracing this food. If I didn't embrace it, I wouldn't be holding it in the very first place. I wouldn't be consuming it. So I'm letting it enter my life. I'm allowing this, you can call this the wu-wei. I'm accepting this, embracing it into my life as if it's natural. And if I'm wrong, well, then nature will tell me, because it's not natural. Now, of course, this is packaged. I understand there's some limitations to this product, and that's with my knowledge. And I can understand, wait, maybe this isn't the most natural product to consume. That's all the matter of knowledge as well. And that's where the word natural comes in that graph as you move down. Understanding morality and rights. Okay, so it's right for me to consume this. This is my answer. This is my embrace. It's giving me responses. It's telling me what I should consume. I now know what to do. It's natural. Okay, so abolitionism and integration comes from that, because if you understand what is right to do, then you know what is wrong to do, what you should not have in your life. That you can call apophysis, the process of taking out what doesn't belong, and abnegation, which is denying what is wrong, saying this is not supposed to be in my life. You can call a mass scale of that abolitionism, a movement of people who are saying we should get rid of this one thing. And in that process of abolitionism is equally so integration, because what you did was you realized there were things that helped you and there are things that aren't helping you. So you're integrating at the same time. I have a presentation coming out about this called Abolition and Integration, so stay tuned. And basically, integration is morale. So while abolitionism is done because you recognize morals and you understand what is right and wrong, there's also morale, not just morals. And that is understanding, okay, you have what is right, but you need to promote what is right. You need to allow what is right to manifest. And that is morale, is putting it into progress, putting it into effect. And you can also call this practice. You can call this, in any art and any, fighting style, you have to practice, and you realize, okay, if I will like this fighting style, or if I think this is going to help my circulation, I know this is going to make my health better, I need to keep doing it. I need to develop a practice around it. I need to make sure it keeps going. And by integrating, you are abolishing. And this is all the process. This entire graph is all the process then of naturalization, which is becoming who you are meant to be. Governments typically use the word naturalization to say you're becoming a citizen. You're becoming part of their system. Well, that's the exact opposite, because it has nothing to do with nature. The word naturalize means to make natural. So you're essentially nurturing or progressing into your life and into the life of the world by allowing things to be natural. And so this whole philosophy, hopefully I just summarized it for you. Hopefully I didn't go too into detail for you, Fred. That's basically what this is. And that was just the left side. The right side is all just the opposite, right? So yes. I assume that would be self-explanatory. If things are disconnected, things are disunionized, things are wrapped in ignorance, and people are saying, oh yeah, we can trample over nature, we can do whatever we want with no consequence, and they're disregarding things. They're saying we can replace this and use this man-made thing instead, and there's no problem or repercussion with that. If they're just wrapped in ignorance, then yeah, they're never going to get anywhere. And a lot of people will use man-made products and say, yeah, I recognize this chair has been definitely modified in forms. It's not what it was in nature. It was a tree. It was something else. Like people can recognize that. But it's the problem where we don't recognize that, and especially for things that are harming us. Like technology could be harming us, and we say, oh yeah, well, technology is something that's not from nature, but we don't have to worry about it. It's like, yeah, might want to worry about it because it might affect our health, especially as it keeps progressing. I mean, where is the limit? Are there limits to how far we can progress as a human species? Well, I will tell you this: the limits are set by our knowledge, by our consciousness. And this is where Elon Musk, and I watched a lot of his recent interviews on AI, and I think he's great. He's very articulate in his interviews. He's talking, speaking his mind. I think that's a beautiful thing. I like to see that because that's humanity. But ironically enough, he's working on machines and AI, which is not humanity. And he knows that. So it's like a difficult thing that he's trying to balance. Is saying like, government regulation is not good, but also we might need to regulate AI. And then he's like, oh, well, AI is the destruction. It's destruction of the world, and it's worse than nuclear bombs, but we need to keep making it. So he's got this weird balance that he is on, and it's making people like him to express his humanity. But at the same time, it's making AI more dangerous because he's mixing his humanity into the situation of something that is unnatural that a lot of people do fear for rightful reason. Now, I'm not saying people should fear AI. What I'm saying is that there's a missing component within what he's talking about and within most AI talks. And that is the idea of knowledge and consciousness. Now, he did mention this a bit sometimes in his tweets. He said we need to increase the consciousness of humanity. But my question would be to Elon Musk or anybody in AI is, how do you plan to do that? Because if you plan on sharing consciousness to human beings by putting brain chips in them or doing certain things, is that really going to help share consciousness or spread it to the world? My question to them is, how do you plan to make the world more conscious so you can have further development of machines without it taking over the universe? And so literally, my philosophy is designed to emphasize the need of knowledge and consciousness so that way we can keep our humanity and recognize who we are versus what the machines are, which we're not going to know that difference very soon. AI is going to the point where you don't know what is real anymore. And that is dangerous, very dangerous, because it can deceive people. And if they're deceived, then they're in ignorance. And then they don't know what is real because they don't have knowledge of what is real. They think what is real is something that is not real, which is the very definition of evil and what is unnatural. So we have to be worried about machines. And a lot of people say in capitalism, it's like, yeah, whatever rises to the market doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's moral just because it can be created by the market, just because everybody has access to it. There's still things on an individual basis without government, take government out of the equation, that we have to worry about. Drugs, and I mentioned health problems, and I mentioned all these things that if you don't looking at the whole bigger picture, you're still missing a huge part of the picture. Okay, because government is the result of individual actions on manifest. It's the result of people ignoring their own health over time.
Absolutely.
So that is core. And this is why I talk about my philosophy in a holistic worldview applied to knowledge, applied to all things.
There, and I think for me, like I was saying to Cory, it sounds very natural, sounds very logical, and it's, I mean, for me it's very, but I encourage people to listen to this podcast again, or see and go see Cory's work. It's incredible. There's plenty, and because I'm used to Cory's work, it for me it's natural. I understand everything, and I agree on everything he says. I don't have anything to debate about it, to argue about it, because for me it sounds right for me,
And
because
it's more
this
simple than I say.
nature, what?
It's more simple than I say.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, when we nature is truth, and
Mhm.
people must like there's no separation between these things. And I like the way you said it way better than me. And I want to bring what can be, at your opinion, what people should do to begin this important work that you're talking about. What should be the focus point that they should people begin with, at your opinion?
Yeah, very important. Crypt Rick also has a question, which I would say ties into that. If you want to put
Yes.
that on the screen, yeah. I think this is very important. And it's like, why did I just say that it's better than what I'm saying right now? Well, rewind the video like not even 30 minutes ago, and I said that maybe it's better we speak less, because if I'm speaking less, guess who's talking more? Nature. You're listening more, and I'm speaking. If I'm not listening because I'm speaking, I would listen more if I'm not speaking. So
Yes.
you, as the person who's listening out there, hopefully you're listening. But for me to get this knowledge, had to listen. It wasn't me speaking that allowed me to get this knowledge. So just realize I can't speak this knowledge because it's already being said. It's already being said. All you have to do is listen to it. So sounds kind of weird. Sounds like, oh, okay, well, you got to like listen to God or talk to him or whatever some people will say in different religions and philosophies. But if you understand what I mean by that, it connects to what I mentioned before, where it's like, we can't speak for nature. We can't be nature. And therefore, if we're trying to understand it, we have to directly live with it. And I'm not saying go into the woods and go build a campfire or whatever, although you might learn a lot from that process, by the way, no doubt. Okay. And there's a lot of tribes who have enormous wisdom, and they don't share it online or with other people. They share it among themselves. But, it could be really helpful for a lot of people. We're detached from our roots to what humanity has been born off of. So very important, but this ties into Kripvik's question. So this also ties into what we can do, as you just asked. Do you want to read the question and then I'll answer? You muted? Hey, you're muted.
Question.
Yeah.
Humans seem to crave technology, always wanting the next best thing. How do we balance this craving for tech and nature?
Yeah. So I think that's a beautiful question, and that's why I wanted you to read it out, because I know I'm going to go into like a rant after this. So, so tech and nature, right? Are they not the same thing? I mean, you can say, well, technology is a product of nature; it came about for the same world. Well, again, anything that is becoming less of nature is becoming more of man. Man took from nature and said we can turn this into this thing and that thing. Doesn't mean that technology is suddenly evil and we should avoid it. It's all about knowledge. So, do we have our nature still intact? This is the balancing question. Because if technology is, say, replacing my organs, replacing all my natural functions, does your nature really belong with you? Do you really have nature anymore? Or is it just all tech? Because you can call this, cyborgs and whatever they call it nowadays. There's transhumanist. That's what they call themselves too. Is the idea that we can take humanity and what is nature and sort of twist it to whatever we want. And they say, well, we can do it, so therefore we can do it. It's like, yeah, well, you could also do wrong things. It doesn't mean you should. So all the matter of understanding what should or what ought is all the matter of understanding nature, because it's the only ought you have to live under. It's nature. Like, you can't contradict it. It's always there. It's if you go against it, you face consequence. And that happens over time, and you have no choice but to abide to it. Whether you're talking about physical laws or, in this case, natural moral law, it's the same scenario, because there's laws that govern everything in nature. But that's if you're going to put it under the context of law. In general, you just can't escape it. You cannot escape. You can't say, I'm not going to live in nature anymore. It's like, you still are. Even if you're living in some warehouse, or if you're living in like some cyber or technology center, it's like, you're still in nature. You realize that, right? Like, you're still going to have to eat. You're still going to have to drink. You're still going to have all your basic functions. And that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. You say, oh, well, don't worry. We will. We're going to get this ventilator. It's going to breathe for you. We're going to get this supplement thing. It's going to feed you. It's like, you realize how much work and how much effort is going to be put into that thing, when actually life is much simpler and much easier with less complication if you just let things be. Because if you start having attachment to material things, to those man-made things, oh, there goes all Eastern philosophy, attachment and desire, and all these warnings they gave us thousands of years ago, before technology that we have now even existed. I bet they would have so much to write about nowadays if they saw what was happening nowadays. They couldn't even predict what's happening nowadays, but yet we can relate so much to their writings. Why is that? That's like incredible. That's insane.
The,
So
the knowledge of philosophy it's
timeless.
timeless. It's
Yeah, and why
timeless.
is that? Because they're studying nature. Nature is timeless. So when humans want to find the balance between tech and nature, it's all about finding out what has always been there. That is the balance, is realizing what has always been there. If you ask yourself those questions and you keep your nature intact by using your nature, as by asking questions, for example, then you will maintain it. And so, no matter how much technology you live with, you will be able to set the limits to technology. Technology will not be limiting you because technology will take away your life and will take over your life. Material things will take over your life if you are not in control of it. You become the tool of your tool, as Ralph Waldo Emerson or Henry David Thoreau said. These were transcendentalists, also abolitionists, who understood this philosophy well. They said, hey, men will become the tools of their tools. And that was right before the Industrial Revolution. While that was happening, this is why they said that, because they were not conscious of what has always been there. And they will say, okay, I will attach myself to this new thing, which has just been created. Like nowadays, how many people are like, we need this vaccine? Oh, well, we can't live without this vaccine. This vaccine is clearly going to help us. Oh, we need this drug. I mean, without this drug, I mean, gosh, there's no other way. It's like, okay, so you're choosing to be ignorant because clearly there's other ways. Clearly there's other options. So to say there are no other options is to say, well, I want to be ignorant because there's clearly an option that has been there all this time, which is nature, whether it's breathing for yourself or eating food rather than taking some synthetic supplement or anything else that I mentioned. So hopefully that answers your question. That's the balance. It's all a matter of using our nature to not lose it.
I think technology will be used as a substitute for nature, and the meta thing there. They want to create a world into a world. It's a matrix inside a matrix,
And then you
actually.
don't know which world you're living in,
And
which is perfect.
what I want to bring, because I've been confronted to this this rhetoric from the spiritualists, that the mental is useless, that we need to go beyond the mental. But essentially, it's a fallacy, because everything is mental. The crisis that we have in human, the depression, the anxiety, the way that we're uh, 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 building these cities, the way we're building the civilization is chaotic, because we're chaotic inside, because we don't have
Right.
any control over our mental.
And when we do, does it matter what we create? What we're going to create is going to be the result of what our minds are. So if our minds are
Exactly.
right, it doesn't matter if we create technology because we will be in control of our own minds. So technology will never take control of us or do anything evil to us because we have the knowledge and therefore we have nature still intact. But if we say, oh, the knowledge must come from the machine which we created with our knowledge, and now the knowledge is not being fed from the roots, when we lose the roots, we lose the building. The building
would
falls
you
down.
would you agree with Fresco, not Fresco, but this gentleman who was featured into um, um, this documentary Zeitgeist, the Venus Project, with all this technology and separating humans from nature and living in large cities, fully automated, so we can grow up and mature and
Mhm.
play and things like that. Would you agree with this idea?
Well, the funny thing is, the excuse people will say is, oh, it's inevitable. Well, by saying it's inevitable, you're going to make it inevitable. It's like saying, oh, well, like zombies exist. Okay, well, if you say zombies exist, well, and everybody thinks zombies exist, then they're going to exist because, as you just said, the world is mental. Like, if people are
Yes.
going to believe in something that it exists, they're going to think it exists. Like,
I
people are like,
mean,
oh my gosh, Cory, you eat raw meat. Oh my gosh, COVID. It's like, where is it? Do I see it? Or are you just believing it because you're told to believe it?
I mean,
Right?
I
So,
mean, it's not.
yes, I know it's not answering your question, but
Yes.
to answer your question about the zeitgeist thing, like you're saying, can people mature? Can people age in a world of technology like that? Is that what you're
I
asking?
mean, can we? Uh, um, because he's not telling about separating us completely, but we wouldn't have to interact with nature anymore. We would live in these big mega cities, completely
Mhm.
automated, separate from nature, so so nature can take back its place without abusing it and
So you're saying we should separate ourselves from nature to a
This
sense
is
by
his.
making
I mean, this is what I understand from his philosophy. This is not what I'm saying.
right, right.
I mean,
It's a
we're
master plan.
Jacques Fresco. Thank
It's
you,
a master
Rick.
plan. That's the
Yeah.
problem. So like it would require that people do certain things or say certain things or live a certain way. And what was the first thing I said when I was introducing this? I said this is not supposed to be a way for people to do certain things or whatever. It's like it's supposed to be a guiding mechanism. And that's it. It's not supposed to say this is the only way we must do things if we want to live on, if we have to do this, like if humanity's going to suffer if we don't do this. Like yeah, you can start making those assumptions, but guess what? No matter how much you might think what I shared was important, you cannot impose that upon the world because you will cause counterintuitive results. This is the idea of the wu-wei in the Ziran. Because if you start saying there's a master plan, there's a way things should be done, already by default, you're already lost in touch with nature because nature is the only one that can control what the master plan is. The minute you say you can be the mastermind, you're assuming the place of nature. So unless you're saying, hey, I'm just going to educate people and they can choose if they want to do it or not. Okay, well then you're a mastermind who is more so just an educator like anybody else. But like if you're a mastermind who's like everybody must do this now because this is this and this is this, and if you don't, well now it's like okay, you are taking the place of nature. Now you're government. Now it's slavery, and people will feel that. It's like you look at all these dystopian movies. It's like these people are in strict conditions. They're being watched
Yes.
24/7. It's like all of this sort of predictive, weird programming. And also just because people can imagine it because they see it as a possibility in the very first place, or as a reality that could be happening under certain circumstances. It can be frightening in some ways. And people who aren't frightened by that, I would question how much humanity or sensitivity or sensitization they have left in their soul.
Oh man, yes, we can. I'd like talk all evening about this. Because
Because
you talk about psychopathy, but yes, psychopaths are dangerous, but narcissist and sociopath are even, I think they're more dangerous because they're very hard to find. You know, they can be everywhere. They can be everywhere because they're actors. Psychopath, sociopath, and narcissist are actors, and this is what we have to confront. And
Mhm,
I'm not saying that talking about them will give them power. This is what I meant is why the Libercast exists is to expose the dark corners and the brighter ones. For this case, there's a philosophy, there's a way to see things, an ideology that is very positive, very optimistic, very empowering. This is what my opinion about what you're telling me. It sounds natural, sounds good, sounds right, and I think what we need to do is get back to nature, to get back to the roots, and discover what is wrong with our society, what is wrong with this culture. And I mean, there are some positive things that we can do
mhm.
and talk about. I know, we you were talking about all these positive things, and for me, shadow work is one of the basis of that. And without introspection, without deep knowledge of the self or nature, because I put knowledge of the self and nature together.
They are
This is how the patterns of life are. You're
right.
going to have these patterns inside of you, and then mentally you're going to, the more you're disconnected with nature, the more your soul, or your spirit or your mind will scream for.
It's the same. Yes.
Yes, they.
Because you are a part of nature, you can't ignore that. So you
Yes,
are acknowledging there's a connection that has to be made, and also, not to mention, but you don't know all of nature. And what could you best
absolutely.
know? Yourself. So logically, it also applies that you should study yourself if you want to learn from nature.
Hmm.
People think they have to look externally all the time in the case of Western religion. That's just why so many people are going back to Eastern religion, or they're like, man, there's so much value in Taoism and Buddhism and these, because like you just meditate and you feel instantly better, or you do some yoga and you're like, wow, where's this energy coming from? It's like because you did it yourself. You weren't asking or in faith trying to achieve it. You actually did it. And it's because you're taking in the natural forces. And if you read their text, it's all about invoking in the natural energies and using it to your advantage, as to realizing you can live in harmony with it. But instead, if you have a narrative that says, well, man is inherently imperfect, they're born with sin, they're bad, and you have to worship and go to church every Sunday, you have to read this book and go through this translation of this interpreter and make sure you go to this group, it's like very confined. This is why people are not having good experiences with it. Not to say that some of those Eastern ones aren't confined at times, or that there still is some of that interjection that happens. But you can see among these texts, if you go back to their roots and origins, and even the Western religions as well, a lot of it was to study from nature. And a lot of those religions were sort of their own governments, minus the violence. They were sort of their
Yeah.
own, like, okay, here are some people who are knowledgeable and you can follow it if you want, and we're going to give you knowledge and stuff like that. But it wasn't about like, okay, you have no choice but to follow. That happened later in time when you had some emperors merge church and state together. And once the state became more like a church, more people were willing to follow it. And more people like basically attached themselves to it. Like people nowadays in America think the Constitution was actually made by God. Like our founding fathers like literally were blessed by the gods to make some piece of parchment, write it down that they can steal our money through taxation. It's like, I don't think nature ever said they can steal our money or that we had to sign a birth certificate. Like, where in nature does it tell me to do those things? I don't get it myself. So where are these guys getting this information from? Did they have some divine revelation that told them that? It's like, how could I agree to that? As a natural human being, am I not the same like them? They said we're all equal with the same rights, but yet they got this revelation that I didn't get. What's going on here? I ask people questions all the time, people in their religious ideology just as much as people in the scientific ideology. And they have a hard time sometimes answering my questions when you really get pretty deep with it.
Hmm. And I would like to bring up what Marco Tessarian says about the occult and the knowledge about nature is that you have to have a love for this knowledge. You have to be feel this connection with it. I mean, a lot of people, most people will not have it, because they haven't been initiated to these knowledge. But I mean, I found this very beautiful the way he said it, that you have to have a love for knowledge,
Hmm.
and this is the only way that we can get ourselves out of this mess.
Well, if you love nature, then you will seek out knowledge because you know where to put the authority. If you put the authority in man, do you truly love the world that you live in? Do you truly love yourself if you put it in another person? I mean, just think about this, right? It's like knowledge and love is basically core and essential connected to each other, because love is just so much as nature. You cannot live without love. Like literally created you. like like people don't realize, but you can connect all these concepts together, which is why I made a whole chart of like correct and honest and right and
Hmm.
healthy, because they don't realize that there's connections to be made. And if you aren't seeing those connections, even if you don't say these terms are exactly the same, if you don't see those connections, you aren't looking at the bigger picture, because the bigger picture would say, wait, this is all connected. The smaller picture would say, oh, this is just one part. Let's focus on this little part and let's not look at the rest. It's like, that's ignorance.
Yeah,
So knowledge is constantly expanding. Oh, what could I find? That's beautiful. That's the whole. That's holistic. Whole health means whole. It's all it is, right? So when I say, hey, this is healthy, I'm also saying that's right. I'm also saying that's correct. I'm saying that's moral. These should line up together. Unless there's a scenario where they shouldn't, you should tell me. Like, is it healthy for somebody to hurt someone to save this other person? Well, because someone was trying to harm them. But it's not healthy for that person to be harmed even then. You recognize that because you have knowledge. You're able to see the bigger picture. If you don't, you're going to be going through all these rabbit holes of questions that most of the time you can find the answer to yourself if you just do enough introspection.
absolutely. I mean, introspection brought me back to nature.
Hmm.
You know, I've been a lot in nature. I played there when I was young. I was walking there, and you can feel it.
Hmm.
This deep connection. Even the smell, just the smell of nature. It's crazy. I mean,
You look at people who eat fast food, and their senses to food and spices starts going away.
yep.
And they don't realize it, but over time, when they keep consuming it, it goes away, and their brain and everything else becomes more stagnated. Whereas they start experimenting like with wine, it starts opening up the brain. There's scientific studies that prove that, and spices, and start experimenting with different things like that. It's same thing with knowledge. You start adding in new knowledge, you start experimenting, and it's great. So let's say somebody is eating a bunch of fast food, but they're thinking all the time and they're thinking outside the box. Then it wouldn't really matter that much that they're eating fast food. Although I would argue, yeah, it would matter if you want a more holistic worldview.
Hmm.
But the mind is so powerful alone that if you can just free the mind, even if you're not healthy in other ways of your life, it's still powerful enough to see a difference in somebody's life. So,
Absolutely.
like, I'm not saying for people to say, oh, okay, just go all the way in nature and just stay there and don't talk to the rest of society. Like, I am not in nature. Do you see me out there? Like, I'm not building a fort. I'm not doing all those things. I mean, I am growing some plants here and there, but I'm just like everybody else. The difference between me and everybody else is I'm recognizing the authority and putting it in nature.
Hmm.
Like, that's where I'm putting it. So any other type of authority would just be an illusion, right? A superstition, a myth.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm doing. And I think anybody can do that. It doesn't take a genius to figure out. I recognize I'm still ignorant of nature in many ways I don't realize because I'm not living out there. So I that's the truth. So like I can't say I have a whole worldview of it, but even if I did, it's like I'm not living in every part of the world, in every circumstance, in every environment. So even then, even if I lived directly in nature, I'd still not know everything about it. So like don't limit yourself just because you are indoors or just because you're on technology. You, like you said, the answers are in yourself. You have the choice of what you want to do with that technology. It's just a tool. It's a thing that you created. And if you created it, you can equally destroy it, or you can choose to do anything with it. But that would require your nature. And by using it, then you can control this and therefore control yourself. You can be in control of your life and not be a slave to anybody, including to technology.
What is the goal of shadow work? Is getting back to your nature,
Hmm.
what you are, without your programming, without your indoctrination, without all these things, and everything gets back to nature.
Yeah, whether we like it or
Everything.
not. Whether we like it or not, it does. And it's like that's why like I'm in Florida right now. Boom, a storm comes by. Goodbye everything. Your whole life. It's like you got to be prepared for that. I'm sorry, but like you have to. Like it doesn't matter what you feel about it. But my house, it's like it's a storm. What are you going to do about it? You're going to be like, "How dare you for doing this storm?" It's like, okay. I mean, if you feel like, okay, maybe there's this energy frequency thing where I can program the storm to go somewhere else with my mind because my mind's that powerful. Hey, maybe there's science that proves that our mind is connected to the sky and the emotions are connected to the sky. Or maybe it's HARP. Maybe it's these, weather modification. Who knows, right? It could be a bunch of different things. It's still all knowledge. It still all depends on human beings and what they choose to do with their reality.
I think the way that they're orchestrating this whole new world that they want us to dive into, is to bring people in the bigger cities, get the people from the rurals and putting them into the big cities. And I think it's a statement for this separation between nature and humans. And I think it's so hard for people for being separated from nature, that it change our being as and our behaviors at the same time. you know I live into a very rural place. It's a very small place, and I like it that way. I decided to go away from cities, and you can see the behaviors and how people talk and how people outside and inside the city. There's a clean difference between the two, but
Hmm.
doesn't mean that one is better than the other.
Exactly.
Some people will feel compelled by living into the cities, in the big cities. For myself, I cannot fucking stand it. I mean, I we have Montreal like at 3 hours from here. and
Mhm.
I cannot fucking stand this city. It smells bad. I can barely breathe. Too much people. This is I grew up with trees and woods and
Me too.
yeah. So
Me
I
too. And
mean,
I'm now around a lot more people than I ever have moving down here, and I recognize that. But the point is recognizing that. Like, so what I
mhm,
just mentioned before, like you can still live in the city or somewhere where there's a lot of industry and still know yourself. But one way or another, you still have to know yourself. Like one way or another, you still have to know your nature. It doesn't matter where you are, you can do it. You can do it. Like to say you can't do it, like, oh, I'm in the city, there's no way I can return to nature. It's like you're basically your own demise at that point, right? Because you're
absolutely.
still in nature. You're just through a lot of different other mechanisms. Because let's be honest, you're right. Like if we look at the cities, these tend to be the people who are the busy go-getters, who are materialists, who tend to want more things. And there's a lot of like, oh, I'm here because of my job. I'm here for money. And then there's advertisements in their faces all the time. So there's constant programming, whether they like it or
Hmm.
not, subconsciously or whatever. And then there's junk food, or there's a lot more food options that some of it might not even be ancestrally or seasonally accurate. A lot of it is exported in. There's a lot more control, a lot more, video cameras. There's a bunch of problems, and people tend to be of a certain mindset. I mean, I came from up north, and a lot of people from New York came down to Pennsylvania where I was, and they're not the nicest people. And I'm not making a generalization, like because someone here might be from New York. Great, you're probably awesome because you're watching this, but also because like the truth is they want to be ignorant. That's why they're evil. That's why they want to have an attitude with other people. They don't want to face their own shadows. They want to live miserable or in a world that they know that they aren't comfortable in, or there's so many different things. They have to address their own health essentially. Everybody needs a health coach in America, my goodness. But it's like, but in New York, I mean, in a lot of cities, you'll see that people are there. It's harder to talk with them in my experience. But you could have someone in the country who's drinking all the time, who doesn't talk
Yeah.
to anybody, and he's just
Absolutely.
as bad.
Yes. Yes.
So it's hard to make the generalization, but I will say you're right. You can see a difference between the people in the country and the city generally, because who's going to be more prepared when things go down? It's going to be the person in the country. Even the guy who's probably drinking all day. I mean, he probably still is more prepared than anybody in the city who's constantly working all the time, who has all the money in the world.
I- if the shift goes to the fan, the people who are in the city, I'm sorry for you, man. You're fucked.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, right, and again, I don't want to make people have their own demise, but you got to think about your situation. Maybe you live in the city and you're in some like really tight block, and you or maybe you're in Florida, right? In Florida, where I am, it's like you have your own gun, and you can maybe you still have it in the city like Mark Passio does, and you keep watch of your neighborhood, and you make sure everything's okay, and you stay to your own business, and you can still do fine possibly in the city. Who's to say you're not, but I will say, yeah, it's more likely you're going to run into more people. So therefore, you can run into more problems. But
I mean, here there's like 1,700 people. It's easier than 2 million people. 2 million people, maybe if the shit really goes in the fan and it's blowing everywhere. 2 million people, it's fucking scary
yeah,
because
yeah.
this hive mindset. It's there. And people will. Yeah, I mean, I've always been fascinated by the George Romero's uh, uh, critics of society, the Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, these zombie movies, but they're a critic of society and culture, and they're this is the best movie ever. I think Dawn of the Dead is the best statement about society ever. And there's a lot of different things like that we can see. We have a lot of different zombie
Hmm.
kind of
Well,
zombie movies,
I did my
and
presentation on Lord of the Rings too, right? Same thing.
yeah,
Did you see that?
a little bit. Yes, I
Yeah. Well,
barely have the
Tolkien.
time.
Tolkien himself in his journal to his brother said, "Hey, I'm an anarchist," and throughout a lot of his text, he's talking about how this ring, the one ring, the ring of power, literally called the ring of power, is corrupting people and
Yeah.
making them turn evil, even the best of people, even the hobbits. But they were the least corruptible because they were the most free and they lived without a government in the Shire. And maybe they had some people who were watching the streets, some people that they were like, hey, he's a really cool leader, but there was like basically no government. He says there's no government explicitly in his journal. So, and he also says Melkor, which is like the darkest evil lord in Lord of the Rings, literally translates to king. Like that's literally the translation is just king and ruler. Like that's literally the translation of the most evil thing in Lord of the Rings. It's like, well, the most evil thing is king, ruler. It's like, okay, that's interesting, right? And then Sauron is the deceiver, the one who's there to serve Melkor. And then you have Saruman, who is known as like this political guy who used to work for good, but then thought, oh, there was no hope for good, so he had to turn dark. And once he's turned to like the dark side, similar to Star Wars, once he's turned more to the dark side, all of a sudden, he's now trying with his deception powers, with his ability to speak really well to people, he's able to convert people to his side. But what's funny is in the movies, the tree people, the people in the forest, there's actually trees that speak and talk and everything. They actually destroy his tower and everything that he created. So he was creating slaves for himself. And yet the trees, nature somehow comes
Nature
and
has to,
floods his
yes.
entire base and destroys all of it, which is just funny. I didn't mention that in the presentation. But yet there's like 3 hours plus of so much other gold that I found through his journals, which people don't often read. They stay to the books and stuff. But his journals was like where he was handwriting letters to people back and forth and sharing his own views and why he created what he created. It's very nice.
There's plenty of movies out there. I would suggest that if you haven't seen, not maybe you, Cory, I don't know if you've seen this movie, but
I haven't. I don't watch enough movies.
the Dark Crystal. It's called like that. Dark Crystal. It's an old movie from the 80s. It's
Okay.
all puppets and things like that. But it's genius. The
Mm-hmm.
guy who wrote this story, he's an occultist for sure. Because there's plenty of principles and nature things there, balance and things like that in the movie. And the series, it's even better. They're fairly new. The series are fairly new and they're very beautiful, very, very well made, and the story is incredible. It's how the Skeksis, they are the dark occultists, and there's a balance. There's another, the Skeksis and the other people were actually the same people, and when they went to this planet, they separated into, and you have these two entities that serve as balance, and you have the Skeksis that are corrupted and evil, and they use their influence to manipulate people and to get their energy, their vital energy. And it's very and awesome. I suggest everyone to go see that. And mainly the movie from the 80s. The movie from the 80s. At the end, it's fucking beautiful. The
Yeah.
movie is by itself. It's worth watching. It's crazy.
Another
Plenty
good
of
one. Another
yeah,
good one is They Live. You probably know about that one.
yeah. One of my favorite movie ever.
Yeah, it's a funny one.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny. I don't watch many movies, but I had to see that one because everybody was using that meme like all everywhere. I was like, man, I got to see this. I like 80s. Anything older is pretty nice. I'm not a fan of like newer stuff that much. That goes for like games, movies, or music, or anything. To be
Mhm.
honest, older stuff tends to be pretty good because it's made with passion and actually people who care. But yeah, They Live was pretty good.
And you remember how much time it took for the main guy to convince his friend to look at the truth? It's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
They fight for 15 minutes or something like that, you know. And this is where we at, you know,
Yeah.
metaphorically.
Yeah. Yeah, and but the thing is, at least they were friends or they stuck by each other, so that way he would eventually recognize it. And this is why, as humanity, we have to generally stick by each other, even the people who we may not like, and even tell them the truth, even if they get offended. Our goal is not to offend them. Our goal is to speak the truth.
Yes.
If we happen to offend them, it's like, sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, but I'm just trying to say what I think is truthful. And hopefully, if you don't see it truthful, okay, but this is the reason why. Do you have a reason contrary to why? It's like most people have never even heard of statism. They never even talk about it. A lot of movies have still not even addressed that underlying belief system. So it'll be really cool to see Larkin Rose's movie come about that, the Jones Plantation. Really looking forward to that. And I recommend if
Hmm.
it's out by now,
I didn't know
you
about
know,
that.
well, people should definitely check it out because it's actually like a full out director, screenplay, actors. Like they had the whole sound thing. It's fully professional, and I wish like what Mark Pasio did with his documentary. Like it was good for a lot of beginners, but I felt like I was expecting more than an hour. I was expecting more personally. Maybe it's because, we talk about this knowledge so much. It's a good introduction, but I feel like Larkin is doing it right because he's doing the advertising. He's got this own soundtrack. He hired like professional people to do it. So it actually comes out to be like really well done. It's even got, I think, its own IMDb page. So it's becoming more mainstream, which is what we want, is to make these ideas more common or at least talked about. So I'm glad to see that. I know he's causing some heat recently online with the communists and socialists. Uh,
Uh,
he's talking about, oh, this ism and that is. It's okay. I guess it's very interesting to see where that goes because I'm somebody who studied everybody, like in the abolitionist time period. A lot of them called themselves socialist or capitalist or whatever, but a lot of them just didn't even title themselves. Like Lysander Spooner never called himself an anarchist, but everybody calls him an anarchist because he does have those positions.
the
But then,
ideology behind.
yeah, but like not even 100 years after, Benjamin Tucker with his magazine called Liberty, his newspaper, was saying, oh, well, Spooner is going to contribute to our paper. And they were very anti-capitalist and they were very anti-religion. They were like atheist. Lysander Spooner was not an atheist. He was a deist. So he was against Christianity, but still believed in God. And so like, just because people disagree does not make them part of one ism or this ism or that ology. And I think people still have this attachment to those isms and ologies, even as they free themselves from statism. They want to grasp to the next ism that they find applicable, whether it's
Hmm.
voluntarism or even natural law ism or whatever you want to call it. I think it's being able to shift back and recognize that our humanity has no labels either. That's it.
I don't like to. I don't want natural law to become a creed. You know, I don't
Hmm.
want to be. I don't want it. It's
Right.
a basis. It's a fundamentals
Hmm.
of
It's something you pass
nature.
down the generations, that
I mean,
parents teach their
every
kids. And
children, every
yeah,
kid should know this. It's
yeah,
like
like basic
basics.
morality.
Yeah, and if you understand natural law and you don't see anything after that, then you're on the good. You're on the good path. If you understand it and you live by it, and you put it in principles. I mean, good for you. I mean, it's the basis there. This is where you learn the balance and
Well,
the all the polarities and things like that you can encounter.
one final thing, if you don't mind me mentioning it, Fred,
Sure.
before we close off,
Yeah.
is if people aren't familiar with C.S. Lewis, he's somebody who did teach natural law in like the 1900s, I'm pretty sure,
Hmm.
that time era. And he did a really good job at it. Yes, he came from a Christian point of view, but you don't have to look at his works on religion. You could look at his works on natural law and still be able to say, wait, he's trying to unify people under just a basic ground of morality. And there's been a lot of books based on his one book called The Abolition of Man. Now, if any of you don't know what this one book is, The Abolition of Man, I think it's somewhat important because he makes basically a warning to humanity, saying that man will basically abolish himself if he does not uphold basic fundamentals of
Hmm.
morality. So, a quote from the book says, the Tao, which others may call natural law or traditional morality, or the first principles of practical reason, or the first platitudes, is not one among a series of possible systems of value. It is the sole source of all value judgments. And That is important because, I talked about Taoism before, and the whole idea is like there isn't a strict standard to things, and there is a balance always between the yin and the yang, and we should stop trying to control everything. So it's interesting because then you might not even apply a direct right and wrong, but clearly you're abiding to nature. So you don't even have to say it's morality. I call it naturality. Abiding to nature is sort of abiding to morality,
That's
whether
good.
you call it morality or not. And so there's another quote from that book where he talks about we make men without chests. And saying basically what he means by that is we focus so much on the mind or in the mental, and we don't look at the heart and our empathy. And that's being able to see like some of this basic morality. So he goes over like all sorts of different perspectives among it. And I think that's what's really, really cool about it. So yeah, and I there's many quotes from the Abolition of Man. I think it's a very interesting book, and he has in that book he has quotes from every single culture, essentially saying the same thing about morality, about the golden rule, how they all share the same message and just
Hmm.
said in different ways. And he's got literally a compilation of different ones. And then there were authors who took that work and then even expanded upon that. And it just goes on and on and on. You have Egyptian, and then you have Hindu, and you have Buddhist, and you have Christian, and it's just every single culture all saying the same thing, like do not steal, do not, violate another person, do not murder. Like it's so basic. This should be known by everybody, right? But it's just that superstition, the statism that people have to be able to unravel and sort out. Because you can say, yeah, I agree with all you want, and they can still agree to government and the state. And it's because they're not connecting the dots. They're not realizing that government is there, people say, for morality, but it has nothing to do with it. So I'll leave people off on that note. And if they want to learn more about that perspective, they can watch our other interview.
Yeah, we I think we done one on
Hmm.
abolitionism.
Yes.
I think,
Yes.
yeah, go see that one. I mean, he talked all the way to the and I mean, I was sitting back, and I was listening because crazy. I mean, I like this, and it and I learned a lot from this one. I mean, where did I get that? I was already like espousing the idea of abolitionism and anarchy, but you brought up all this background, this
Hmm.
history about it, and the spirit of this
More holistic.
ideology, and
Yes.
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story, and it's very empowering. And I encourage everyone to go on the liberator.us and Nita and Facebook, YouTube, Cory.
Every platform. The Liberator.us, the main project, get involved.
The Libercast there, I'm featuring all this stuff. Cory is featuring his stuff on the Libercast too. So if you're following, I suggest
Libercast, the
you to go
Liberator.
directly to Cory's work, to Cory's page and work on YouTube. I think it's the same. It's your name. So
Yep. Corey, nature is the answer.
yeah. So go see there, and the Libercast is on Facebook, YouTube, Odyssey. I suggest everyone to go on Odyssey right away and skip YouTube
It's very nice. Yeah.
because it's a free, no censorship. You can download the stuff there. You can download every videos if you want to, and we're making it for free. So go explore it, and thank you again, Cory, for being there. And we're gonna have another one if you wish about abolitionism, and I want to do another one because it's fairly old now, and I want to refresh this. I know you learned a lot of things since then, so if you want to, you can come back. I'm enjoying every time.
I think we covered a lot of topics here and in the last one. So definitely a
Yeah,
lot for people to unravel. Thank you so
yes,
much.
it's my pleasure, man. So everyone, thank you for being there. Thank you for supporting Cory's work and the Libercast, and we're gonna see ourselves next time, probably in French in the next one. So take care, everybody. Bye.